Hello, this is Kevin Cofield with Cofield Aviation. Welcome to part two of the National Airspace System videos. We're going to talk uncontrolled airspace and special use airspace. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, in part one video, we talked everything about controlled airspace. So class A, B, C, D, and E airspaces, the communication requirements, their surveillance requirements, and the VFR minimum requirements, as well as speed limits as well. So let's go straight to class G airspace. So class G is always going to be starting at the surface. So G for ground, okay? So it's going to go to the surface up to whatever airspace is basically overlying it there. So typically it'll be always class E airspace. So let's look at a few of examples. Let's go to the map here. Now, let's just say right in that area right there. Class G is going to start at the surface and go up to 1200 feet AGL because Class E, if you remember from the previous video, Class E will start at 1200 feet AGL if it's not depicted anywhere. Now, if we come over here on top of Gadsden, we circle right there, Class G airspace is going to start at the surface and go up to 700 feet AGL because it's inside the shaded magenta right there, meaning Class E starts at 700 feet. So Class G would be from the ground up to 700 feet. And an example of where Class E would start at the surface, which would be right here over Anniston, Class G airspace does not exist in that area right there. Okay, so that's how you can spot Class G airspace on the sectional chart. It's not going to be labeled anywhere basically, but Class G always starts at the ground and will go up to the underlying airspace. Let's look at a little example right here over in Birmingham. So Speedway, we talked about this in the first video. Let's discuss the airspace from the ground all the way up to Class Alpha airspace at 18,000 feet. So right over the top of the Speedway, we're going to have Class G. It's going to start at the surface and go up to 700 feet AGL. Now, where did I get that? If you'll see, there is a little bit of a shaded magenta all the way around that Class Charlie airspace. So that's bringing Class E airspace from 1200 feet AGL to 700 feet AGL. So I know right over top of that speedway, we're going to have from the ground to 700 feet AGL, it's going to be Class G uncontrolled airspace. From 700 feet AGL all the way up to 2400 feet MSL. Now these 4624 is MSL altitudes, so don't let that confuse you. But from 700 feet AGL over top of the speedway up to 2,400 feet MSL is Class Echo airspace. So from 2,400 to 4,600 would be Class Charlie airspace. From 4,600 all the way up to 18,000 feet basically would be Class E airspace again. So let's break down all those requirements for Class G. So typical dimensions is going to be surface to 700 or 1200 feet AGL, depending upon where you are, and you see that on the sectional chart. Now, there is no communication requirement here. There is no surveillance requirement in uncontrolled airspace, and the VFR minimum is quite lax. Now, during the day, you only need 1 mile clear of clouds for your VFR minimums. Now, one statute miles visibility is not much visibility at all. For pilots like at the Gadsden Airport, runway 624 is 6,800 feet long. So you would not be able to see the end of the runway with one statute miles visibility, which is crazy. Clear clouds, we don't have to maintain a certain distance away from the clouds. We just maintain clear clouds during the day. Now at nighttime, that will revert back to 3 statute miles, 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, and 2,000 feet horizontal. Okay, less than 10,000 feet, 250 knots there. Now, if we wanted in Class Echo airspace to have the same VFR minimums as Class G airspace during the day, 1 mile clear of clouds, there is a way we could do that, but we would have to ask air traffic control for permission to do that. That's what we call special VFR. Okay, so let's work through a scenario here. Gadsden Airport, it's 800-foot overcast. Um, you need 3 takeoffs, 3 landings every 90 days to carry passengers, right? So we need to get in 3 takeoffs and 3 landings because tomorrow we're going to the beach or whatever. It's 800-foot overcast. Can we do that? Now, traffic pattern altitude is typically 1,000 feet, right? Now, the traffic pattern is basically a rectangular course, which when we talk ground reference maneuvers, the ACS for the private pilot standards defines ground reference maneuvers as turns around a point, rectangular course, and as turns across the road. And it tells us we can do those between 600 feet AGL and 1,000 feet AGL. So the rectangular course is basically a traffic pattern. So I concur with that we could do the traffic pattern between 600 and 1,000 feet AGL. Now, right over top of the Gadsden Airport, let's look at this. If we wanted to do a traffic pattern for runway 24, there's our little traffic pattern there for 24. If it's 800-foot overcast, where are the clouds? What airspace are in the clouds? So we know right over here at the top of the Gadsden Airport, Class E comes down to 700 feet AGL. So from the surface to 700 feet AGL, it's Class G airspace. We got 1 mile clear of clouds. So I could technically fly the pattern, get my 3 takeoffs and 3 landings during the day. I could do that at 600 feet AGL. So 569 feet plus 600 feet would give me the MSL altitude that I would fly there. And that would be legal to do. Once I got to 700 feet AGL, though, now I'd be in Class Echo airspace that I have to maintain 500 feet below the clouds. If the clouds are at 800 feet AGL and I'm at 700 feet AGL in Class E airspace, I'm technically illegal VFR because I'd have to maintain 500 feet below the clouds. So a little bit of a caveat there. Would I want to try to use that to go on a cross country somewhere? Absolutely not. But staying in the pattern, 800 and 900-foot overcast at Gadsden, even 700-foot overcast, we just got to maintain 1 mile clear of clouds in Class G airspace there. Same scenario, except we're based here at Anniston Regional Airport. At Anniston Regional Airport, Class G airspace does not exist. If you'll see here, we've got the Anniston Airport, and that dashed magenta, meaning that Class E airspace starts at the surface and goes all the way up to 18,000 feet there. So, same scenario, 800-foot overcast at Anniston. Can I fly the pattern? The answer to that would be no, because we'd have to maintain 500 feet below the clouds, 1,000 feet above, 2,000 feet horizontal, 3 statute miles. So even if it was 10 statute miles visibility overcast 800 feet, we cannot do the pattern in Anniston. However, if we really, really needed to do that, we got to get our 3 takeoffs and 3 landings every 90 days to carry passengers. We want to carry passengers to the beach tomorrow. It's going to be severe clear. It's going to be great. There is a way we could do it. We could request a special VFR clearance from air traffic control. So we could basically call up Birmingham Approach at the Anniston Airport there and request a special VFR. If they issue us a special VFR, now our clearance requirements go to 1 statute mile clear cloud. So we could go 600 feet AGL and do our 3 takeoffs and 3 landings with that special VFR. Again, would I want to try to do a cross country or really exit the pattern at all? No. Special VFR, think of the Kobe Bryant crash, right? That's what he was operating under. That whole scenario is a charter helicopter, but they were VFR only. They could not fly instruments in their charter, so they were trying their best to skirt around the rules as much as possible, but they were doing it legally. 1 mile clear of clouds when he got the special VFR clearance. So that's a little bit of a caveat there. So if you request special VFR in controlled airspace, if you get approved special VFR during the day only, 1 mile clear of clouds. At nighttime, you got to be instrument rated, and the airplane has to be instrument capable at all as well. Nighttime special VFR would be an absolutely terrible idea. Okay, that's uncontrolled airspace in a nutshell, and kind of how we can see where uncontrolled airspace is and maybe use those rules to our advantage. So 1 mile clear clouds during the day, at night 150 to 3 statute miles, 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, 2,000 feet horizontal. Okay, this is a little bit of an airspace classification, kind of see where Class A is there. There's your Class Bravo upside down wedding cake, Class Charlie, a little bit of an upside down wedding cake. Class D is just surface up to an altitude. Then you got your basically your Class E everywhere else, and then Class G there, 700 feet to 1,200 feet AGL. We looked through all of that on the sectional chart. Let's go to special use airspace. We're going to scroll through here. First, we're going to talk about prohibited airspace. Prohibited airspace, you absolutely cannot fly through this airspace ever. There's very, very little prohibitive airspace, but one example would be right over there in Washington, D.C. Okay, so prohibitive airspace, that's what that would look like. Start with a P there, P-56 there over the, I guess that's over the White House. You cannot fly through prohibitive airspace. Okay, case closed. Restricted airspace. Now, restricted airspace is going to be outlined with blue and looks like little dashes there. R-2102 is restricted airspace here. Now, you can fly through restricted airspace with permission from air traffic control. If you don't want to talk to air traffic control, you don't want to see if it's what they call hot, then just fly around it. Avoid restricted airspace. But you can enter with permission, okay? Cannot enter without permission. So let's look at several examples of restricted airspace. There's one example here right north of Anniston. You can see that restricted airspace right here, okay? R-2102. To clear any confusion, this airspace right here is actually pertaining right here. It's not really an airspace, a special use airspace, but it's just saying for reasons of national security, pilots are requested to avoid flight at or below 5,000 feet in this area. So that's just with this little dashed. It's almost similar to the Class Echo there in Anniston, but that is just like a national security requested. You'll see that sometimes along coastal areas for wildlife inhabitants, so you don't disturb babies or something. They'll request for you to not fly at some certain altitude, but that's not mandatory, just a request. So there's some restricted airspace. There's also some restricted airspace up here in Huntsville. So you see all that right there. And let's go down here. I think there is some restricted airspace here near Columbus, right here. So there is some restricted airspace there. So if you want to fly in this area with ForeFlight, if you just hold your finger down over top of it, let me get rid of this. If you just hold your finger down, it'll pop up the different airspaces, highlight it, and you can go to details and kind of it'll show you where it's at. To me, I'm not going to try to get in there in the nitty gritty and figure out, okay, it's surfaced 8,000 to 16,000 or whatever. If I want to fly through that airspace, I'm going to call air traffic control or flight service station and see if it's active. If I don't want to go through that hassle, then I'm just going to fly around it, basically. So that's a few examples of restricted airspace. A lot of restricted airspace is down here on the Gulf. If you look right here over the beach, I'll show it to you right there. Now this one, you can kind of see that highlighted area there. 8,500 feet up to unlimited. So you could technically fly along the beach right here as long as you stay below 8,500 feet, because the restricted airspace does not start until 8,500 feet. But this is a SATR, SATR, Special Air Traffic Rule Area. We'll talk about that in just a second. This little dashed area here, but again, we'll get to that in just a second. But that's the restricted airspace. So you can fly through it with permission. Just contact air traffic control and go from there. A temporary flight restriction is basically a pop-up restricted airspace. So it applies the exact same way as restricted airspace. Can you fly through a TFR? Yeah, you can with permission. But if you don't want to give permission, avoid the TFRs, but contact the air traffic control facility to see if you can do that. TFRs are issued by NOTAM, typically, like VIP TFRs for like President of the United States or whatever. Sporting events, you'll see TFRs go from basically the surface to 3,000 feet over typical sporting events as well. So again, it's just like a pop-up restricted airspace. So treat it as restricted airspace. And TFRs are important. That's the reason why in that raw fat runway links, alternate weather and NOTAMs, a W, checking those NOTAMs because TFRs can pop up at any time and it is a restricted airspace. If you violate a TFR, you could get a violation for sure. Okay, let's talk about an MOA, military operating area. Now we can enter without permission, but we need to be cautious of fast flying and highly maneuverable military aircraft for sure. Now, but VFR, we can fly through military operating areas without contacting air traffic control or getting permission in any way. So let's look at some of the military operating areas. Bunch of them down here. South, you can look at this one right here is a Rose Hill MOA. Let's go up here. This is the Camden Ridge MOA all through here. So if you wanted to fly through this area, you could. As a VFR pilot, just be cautious of maneuvering aircraft. And if we wanted to see where it started and stopped, this one right here goes from 10,000 to 18,000 feet. So if we were below 10,000 feet, we'd be outside of the airspace. But if you look at this, 500 to 10,000 basically. So another example, you can see there's a bunch of MOAs over here. Meridian West MOA near Columbus, Meridian East MOA, and I think over here near Columbus, Georgia, there was our restricted airspace right here, and here's an MOA. So we can fly through that MOA, we cannot fly through the restricted airspace. So all these are special use airspaces, okay? Now let's go to a special air traffic rules area, like I just talked about. So special rules for a designated airspace. So basically, let's go down here in Destin and look at this special air traffic rules area. So typical rules go out the window. So it's its own set of rules here. You see it's kind of highlighted right here in this white. So we're going to come down right here and there's the dark, there's the light. So to fly in this corridor right here, we just read what it says here. So clearance required prior to entering north-south corridor. Contact Eglin on 124.05. Recommended north-south routings 3,500 feet or below. So the special air traffic rules, FAA Part 93 requires pilots to obtain an ATC clearance prior to entering and operating within the Eglin terminal area here. So let's look at this right here. If this special air traffic rules, and this will kind of a little make sense to you maybe, if this special air traffic rules area was not in place right here, let's see what it would be like, okay? So if we were flying north and south, this is all restricted airspace, surface to unlimited, restricted surface to unlimited over here. So we could not fly any of this. So we're going to have a lot of traffic going north and south. If this SATAR was not here, then it looks like class Delta goes up to 27 here. Class Delta goes to 26 here, goes to 16 here over Destin. So at 3,000 feet right here, if this special air traffic rule area was not in place, you'd be in Class Echo airspace. Would we have to talk to anybody? No. Would we need a transponder? No. But there is a lot of traffic going to Destin and South Florida area right here. A lot of VFR traffic as well, and they know that. And with the military traffic there at Eglin as well, that's why they put this special air traffic rules area. This basically makes it the same as a Class Charlie airspace, where now you need to have two-way radio communication prior to entering this area right here, north and south. Now, the east-west corridor, if you look, goes just like that. So same thing. If we wanted to be flying that area right there along the beach in Destin, below 8,500, right? Because of the restricted airspace there, restricted airspace there, we'd have to contact Eglin on 132.1. Recommended east-west routings, obviously below 8,500 feet because of the restricted airspace. High density jet traffic, 3,000 feet and below. So this special air traffic rule area is in place right there just because it's a very busy airspace, and it's just not like a typical Class Charlie, but it basically has its own set of rules, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's special air traffic rules area. Next is we're going to see a special flight rules area. Special flight rules area is where normal airspace and flight rules do not apply, okay? It has its own set of rules and regulations in order to enter. This is an example of the Washington Special Flight Rules area. So let's pull this up on the sectional chart here. Go up here to Washington, D.C. Okay, if you see all of this, this is all a special air traffic rules area. So if we wanted to fly VFR anywhere inside of this, we've got to get special training, special authorization. The normal rules of transponders and whatnot is out the window in this area. Okay, so we have to actually have special training. I've never done the special training because I've never flown VFR in that area. I've always flown IFR into Washington, D.C. But if you wanted to fly VFR, you got to have special training and stuff because there are special rules that apply all in this airspace, and it makes sense because it's near the U.S. Capitol and within about 30 miles of the U.S. Capitol. So all that makes sense. Okay, so that's the special flight rules area. Okay, and that's pretty much it with the special use airspaces. You also have certain types of airspaces like alert areas. If you look right there, alert area 211, high volume of rotary and fixed wing training. You can fly through an alert area without permission. Just be alert of, in this area right here, of high volume of rotary and fixed wing training. Also, warning areas are the same there. All right, that pretty much does it for uncontrolled airspace, and that does it for the special use airspace. Remember, prohibited airspace you cannot fly through at all. Restricted airspace like this one right here over Anniston, you can fly through it with permission. So you got to contact air traffic control or flight service station to see if that is active. The military operating areas you can fly through without permission. So you got like the MOAs right here. You can fly through that VFR. Special air traffic rules area like we looked at in Destin, special flight rules areas. And also TFRs. Let's pull up a few TFRs here. It's just a temporary flight restriction. We got one right here over Disney World. If you click on it, it'll tell you surface to 3,000 feet AGL. So ForeFlight's pretty awesome. It'll tell you all that. You'd also be getting that in a briefing as well. Okay, and there's the one permanently held, a permanent TFR, permanent temporary flight restriction over Washington, D.C. So, all right, hope that helps. And if you got any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks.